Polly's feathers ruffled as soon as Richard walked through the door. My African grey parrot had never behaved this way with any of my previous visitors, not even the plumber who accidentally flooded my bathroom last winter. But with Richard, it was different. Instant, visceral hostility. "That bird still has a problem with me," Richard remarked, keeping a safe distance from Polly's cage. His tall frame and chiseled features usually drew appreciative glances wherever we went, but Polly was decidedly unimpressed. "She just needs time to warm up to you," I said, though we both knew this was a lie. Polly had met Richard 12 times now, and her reaction had progressed from initial wariness to outright antagonism. Today, she was fixing him with a stare so intense it could have burned through steel. "I am Patricia Weber, proud owner of a small bookstore in the heart of our coastal town. When I am not helping customers find their next literary adventure, I am usually at home with Polly, who had been my loyal companion since I adopted her from an elderly language professor who could no longer care for her. That professor had spent years teaching Polly not just to mimic words, but to understand context and meaning. She was extraordinarily intelligent, even for an African grey. Maybe she is jealous," Richard suggested, settling onto my sofa and loosening his expensive tie. He worked in finance, something about investments and portfolios that always made my eyes glaze over when he explained it. "Animals can sense when they are not the center of attention anymore." Polly responded by making a perfect imitation of a phone ringing, followed by what sounded suspiciously like, "Gotta go, babe, work emergency." It was Richard's standard excuse whenever our dates ended abruptly. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Did you teach her to say that?" Richard asked, his perfectly groomed eyebrows drawing together. "Of course not," I replied, equally confused. "She picks things up on her own." The truth was, Polly had an uncanny ability to mimic conversations she overheard, often at the most inappropriate moments. But this was different. This sounded like a private conversation, one I hadn't been privy to. Polly's eyes, intelligent and calculating, never left Richard. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. In a voice that sounded nothing like mine or Richard's, she said clearly, "Don't trust, bad man, lies." The room fell silent. Richard laughed, but it sounded forced. "Your bird's got quite an imagination." "For she must have heard it on television," I said quickly, though I rarely watched TV, and when I did, it was usually baking competitions or nature documentaries, hardly the stuff of dramatic warnings. Richard changed the subject, launching into a story about his recent business success. As he spoke, I couldn't help but notice how Polly watched him, her head tilted slightly, as if she was analyzing every word. Occasionally, she would make small clicking sounds, her way of expressing skepticism, I learned. Later that evening, after Richard had left, another work emergency naturally, I sat in front of Polly's cage, troubled by her behavior. "What's going on with you?" I asked her. "Why don't you like Richard?" Polly ruffled her feathers and said nothing, which was unusual for her. She typically had an opinion about everything. The next morning, as I was preparing to open my bookstore, my phone rang. It was Wyatt, my closest friend since childhood, and the only person who loved books as much as I did. He helped me run the store when he wasn't busy with his job as a local journalist. "Have you seen the news?" he asked without preamble. "Good morning to you too," I replied, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I sorted through a new shipment of novels. "Patricia, seriously, check the local news site." Something in his tone made me put down the books. I pulled up the news on my laptop, and there it was. Local investment advisor under investigation for fraud. The accompanying photo showed Richard, looking considerably less polished than usual, being escorted into a police station. My stomach dropped. According to the article, Richard was suspected of running a sophisticated investment scheme that had defrauded clients of millions. The investigation had been ongoing for months. "Isn't it that you're Richard?" Wyatt asked, his voice gentle. Yes, I managed, my mind reeling. How could I not have known? We'd been dating for months. I had no idea. "Of course you didn't, Wyatt assured me. He was apparently very good at keeping it quiet. The article says he maintained a legitimate business front." After hanging up, I turned to find Polly watching me intently from her cage. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered. "Somehow you knew." Polly tilted her head and repeated, "Bad man, lies." The next few days passed in a blur. Richard Om's face was all over the local news. Former clients came forward with stories of lost savings and broken trust. Several spoke of how charming and convincing he had been, qualities I was all too familiar with. I ignored his increasingly desperate calls and texts, feeling sick at how close I'd come to being another victim. He had recently begun suggesting we combine our finances for efficiency. A week after the news broke, Wyatt stopped by my apartment after we closed the bookstore. His kind eyes were filled with concern as he handed me a cup of tea. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," I admitted. "I think I am still in shock. How did I miss all the warning signs? I mean, the sudden work emergencies, the vague explanations about his business. Even Polly tried to warn me." Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "Polly?" I nodded toward the parrot, who was busying herself with a wooden puzzle toy. She hated him from day one, would get agitated whenever he came over, even said, "Bad man, lies." "That's unsettling," Wyatt said, glancing at Polly with newfound respect. "Tell me about it. I thought she was just being territorial." As we talked, I realized how much Richard had gradually isolated me from friends like Wyatt. There was always some reason why we couldn't join group gatherings, or why my old friends wouldn't understand his sophisticated world. "You know what's strange?" I said, refilling our teacups. Richard seemed genuinely interested in Polly, despite her obvious dislike of him. He was always asking questions about her, how smart she was, how much she understood, that sort of thing. "Maybe he was worried about what she might have overheard," Wyatt suggested. The thought hadn't occurred to me, but it made a disturbing kind of sense. Polly was often in her cage in my living room when Richard made his business calls. Later that night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, trying to reconcile the Richard I thought I knew with the man described in the news. In one photo taken in my apartment, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Richard in the background glancing surreptitiously at Polly's cage while he thought I wasn't looking. His expression was calculating, almost worried. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What if Polly had overheard something incriminating? What if she really did understand more than anyone realized? The next morning, I awoke to pounding on my door. Disoriented and still half asleep, I stumbled to answer it, expecting to see Wyatt or perhaps a delivery person. Instead, I found myself face to face with Richard. Gone was the polished, confident man I'd been dating. His designer clothes were rumpled, his hair disheveled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. But what truly frightened me was the desperate, almost feral look in his gaze. "Patricia, please," he said, his voice cracking. "I need to talk to you. It is not what it looks like. I can explain everything." I tried to close the door, but his foot was already in the jamb. "Richard, you need to leave, now." "Just 5 minutes," he pleaded. "That's all I am asking." Before I could respond, a familiar voice called out from behind me. "Bad man, go away, police coming." Richard's head snapped up, his eyes locking on Polly, who was watching from her perch across the room. His expression changed, hardened in a way that sent shivers down my spine. "That bird," he said softly, almost to himself. "It knows too much." In that moment I realized Wyatt had been right. Polly had overheard something important enough to make Richard desperate to get into my apartment, despite the risk of being seen while under investigation. "I am calling the police," I said firmly, reaching for my phone. Richard's face contorted with anger. "What you don't understand what's at stake here?" He pushed past me into the apartment, his movements frantic as he headed straight for Polly's cage. The parrot screeched in alarm, flapping her wings and retreating to the farthest corner of her enclosure. I lunged for Richard, grabbing his arm. "Stop! Leave her alone!" He shook me off with surprising strength, sending me stumbling backward. "That bird has recordings of my calls in its head. Do you understand? It could ruin everything." As he reached for the cage door, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. Richard froze, his hand on the latch, then turned to me with a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed, before rushing past me and out the door. I collapsed onto the sofa, shaking uncontrollably. Polly had gone silent, watching the door with an intensity that matched my own terror. The sirens grew louder, then stopped abruptly. Car doors slammed outside. My phone rang. It was Wyatt. "Patricia, are you okay? I saw Richard heading toward your building and called the police. I am outside right now." Relief flooded through me. He was here. He tried to... I couldn't even finish the sentence. He was after Polly. Said she knew too much. There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Stay where you are. The police are talking to him now. I am coming up." After I hung up, I approached Polly's cage cautiously. She was still agitated, her feathers puffed out in distress. "It's okay," I whispered, opening the cage door slowly. "He is gone now. You are safe." Polly stepped tentatively onto my outstretched hand, her body tense. As I gently stroked her head, she began to relax, leaning into my touch. "What did you hear, Polly?" I asked softly. "What does Richard think you know?" Polly looked at me with those intelligent eyes, and then in a voice that was unmistakably Richard's, yes, she said, "The offshore accounts are set. Once the last transfer's clear, we disappear. No one will ever find us, or the money." I stared at her in disbelief. No wonder Richard had been so interested in how much she understood, how good her memory was. Polly had been an unwitting witness to his crimes all along. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. Richard would soon disappear, leaving a trail of questions and danger that would change my life forever. And through it all, Polly would prove to be not just a pet, but the key to unraveling a mystery that went far deeper than a simple investment fraud. The police took my statement that afternoon. Officer James Burton listened carefully as I explained Richard's bizarre behavior and his apparent obsession with my parrot. His partner, a woman with sharp eyes named Officer Ursula Fletcher, took notes while occasionally glancing at Polly with undisguised curiosity. "So you were saying your boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, broke into your apartment because he was worried about what your parrot might have overheard?" Officer Burton's tone wasn't dismissive exactly, but I could hear the skepticism. "I know how it sounds," I admitted. "But African greys have exceptional memories and language abilities. Polly can repeat conversations verbatim, even ones from weeks ago." As if on cue, Polly bobbed her head and perfectly mimicked Officer Fletcher's earlier greeting. "Good afternoon, Ms. Weber. I am Officer Fletcher. This is my partner, Officer Burton." The officers exchanged surprised glances. "That's remarkable," Officer Fletcher said. But even if your bird did overhear something incriminating, it wouldn't be admissible in court." "I don't think Richard was worried about court," I explained. "He seemed terrified that Polly might repeat something to me, something that would reveal where he'd hidden the money." Officer Burton leaned forward. "Did the bird actually say anything specific? Anything that might help us locate these offshore accounts Mr. Evans mentioned?" Before I could answer, Wyatt, who had been silently sitting beside me, spoke up. "Shouldn't you be asking these questions after reading her rights? Last I checked, neither Patricia nor her parrot are suspects." The officers backed off slightly. "Of course," Officer Burton said. "We were just trying to gather information. Mr. Evans disappeared after we attempted to question him outside your building. His car was found abandoned 2 blocks away." My stomach dropped. "Disappeared? You mean he got away?" "For now," Officer Fletcher said grimly. "But we'll find him. In the meantime, we advise you to be careful. Based on his behavior today, he seems unstable." After they left, promising to station a patrol car outside my building, Wyatt helped me install a new deadbolt and a security chain on my door. His normally jovial expression was replaced with worry. "You can stay with me if you like," he offered. "My spare room is tiny, but there is plenty of space for Polly's cage." The offer was tempting, but something held me back. "Thanks, but I think we'll be okay here. The police are outside, and honestly, I doubt Richard would risk coming back now that they were looking for him." Wyatt didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press the issue. Before leaving, he programmed his number on speed dial on my phone and made me promise to call at the first sign of trouble. That night I sat with Polly on the couch, the TV on low for background noise. She seemed more subdued than usual, occasionally making soft clicking sounds as she nestled against my shoulder. "What else did you hear, Polly?" I whispered, stroking her feathers. What was Richard planning? Polly tilted her head, those intelligent eyes studying my face. Then, in Richard S.'s smooth voice, Kevin S. getting nervous, wants out, might need to take care of him. I froze. Kevin? Richard had mentioned a business partner named Kevin several times. Was this the same person? And what did take care of him mean? In the context of everything else, it sounded ominous. My mind raced. Should I call the police again? But with just this cryptic statement, what could they do? I needed more information. Polly, who is Kevin? Did Richard say anything else about him? But Polly had apparently tired of the conversation. She fluffed her feathers and began preening, ignoring my question entirely. The next morning, I awoke to a text from Wyatt. Check the news. Call me. With a growing sense of dread, I pulled up the local news site on my phone. The headline made my heart skip. Body found in harbour, identified as Kevin Marshall, business associate of fraud suspect. Kevin Marshall, the same Kevin that Richard had mentioned taking care of. My hands shaking, I called Wyatt. Did you see it? He asked without preamble. Yes. Wyatt, Polly mentioned Kevin last night. Something Richard said about him getting nervous and wanting out, and that he might need to take care of him. Silence on the other end. Then, Patricia, you need to call the police right now. An hour later, my apartment was filled with officers again, including a detective named Marcus Lewis who specialized in financial crimes. Detective Lewis was middle-aged, with prematurely silver hair and the patient demeanor of someone used to untangling complex puzzles. Tell me exactly what your parrot said, he requested, his pen poised over his notebook. I repeated Polly S. mimicry of Richard S. words. As I spoke, Detective Lewis S. expression grew increasingly serious. And you were certain this was something Mr. Evans actually said? Not just random words the bird put together? Absolutely certain, I affirmed. Polly doesn't create sentences on her own. She repeats what she heard. Detective Lewis turned his attention to Polly, who was watching the proceedings with apparent interest from her perch. And how much else might she have overheard? I have no way of knowing, I admitted. Richard often took calls in my living room, while I was in the kitchen or bathroom. Polly could have heard any number of conversations. The detective nodded thoughtfully. Ms. Weber, I'd like to assign an officer to stay with you for the next few days, not just outside in a patrol car, but actually in your apartment. My eyes widened. You think I am in danger? I think your parrot might be the key to finding both Mr. Evans and the missing money, and if Mr. Evans believes that too, then yes, I think you could be in danger. The gravity of the situation hit me all at once. This wasn't just about fraud anymore. Kevin Marshall was dead, and all signs pointed to Richard E.'s involvement. I was potentially harboring a witness, albeit an unusual one, to conversations related to both crimes. Officer Fletcher was assigned to stay with me. She arrived that evening with a small overnight bag and a surprisingly comprehensive knowledge of exotic birds. My sister breeds macaws, she explained, watching as Polly investigated her from a safe distance. That's not quite the same as an African grey, but close enough. Smart creatures. Having another person in my small apartment was awkward at first, but Ursula S.'s calm professionalism was reassuring. We agreed that she would sleep on the pull-out sofa in my living room, positioning herself between the front door and my bedroom. Do you really think he'll come back? I asked, as we prepared a simple dinner. Ursula considered this, her expression carefully neutral. So most people in his position would be focused on fleeing the country, but most people don't break into their ex-girlfriend S apartment to threaten a parrot either. Better safe than sorry. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read it. I know the police are there. It want help. I want what is mine, the bird or the recordings. Your choice. I called out for Officer Fletcher, my voice trembling. She read the text, her professional composure momentarily slipping. He's watching the apartment, she muttered, moving quickly to the windows to check the street below. Stay away from the windows, I am calling for backup. As she spoke into her radio requesting additional officers to search the area, Polly suddenly became agitated, pacing on her perch and making the sound of a phone ringing repeatedly. "What is wrong with her?" Ursula asked, momentarily distracted from her call. I moved toward Polly S. cage. "I am not sure. She seems—" The lights went out abruptly, plunging the apartment into darkness. "Patricia, get down!" Ursula shouted, drawing her weapon. "Away from the windows!" I dropped to the floor, my heart pounding in my chest. Ursula S. silhouette moved toward the door, checking that it was still secure. "Gun the power S out in the whole building," she reported after glancing through the peephole. "Could be a coincidence, but I doubt it." In the darkness, Polly S. distress escalated. She began mimicking snippets of conversations, her voice changing rapidly between Richard S. confident tone and others I didn't recognize. "Backup generator, security system, 10 minutes max. Front entrance, rear exit, cleaners come through. Maintenance door on the roof." A chill ran down my spine. These weren't random phrases. This was Richard planning how to get into my building. "Officer Fletcher," I whispered urgently. "I think he's coming through the maintenance access on the roof." Ursula didn't question how I knew this. She immediately radioed the information to her colleagues, requesting that they check the roof access. Moments later, her radio crackled with confirmation. The roof door had been forced open. Officers were in pursuit of a suspect heading down the east stairwell. "Stay here," Ursula ordered, moving toward my apartment door. "Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me or another officer. Understood?" Before I could protest, she was gone. I locked the door with shaking hands, then retreated to my bedroom, where Polly S. cage was now situated. The darkness felt oppressive, broken only by the occasional flash of police lights from outside. Polly had gone eerily quiet, which was more unsettling than her previous agitation. I whispered reassurances to her, trying to keep my own fear in check. Minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. From outside, I could hear shouting and the sound of running footsteps. Then silence. My phone's screen illuminated with another text. "Almost got me. Not quite. This isn't over." I was about to call Officer Fletcher when I heard my apartment door opening. Relief flooded through me. Ursula was back. "Officer Fletcher," I called out, stepping tentatively from my bedroom. No response. Fear crawled up my spine. I retreated back into the bedroom, quietly closing and locking the door. In the darkness, I could make out Polly S. silhouette in her cage, completely still now. Footsteps approached the bedroom door. Slow, measured. Not the brisk professional stride of Officer Fletcher. "Patricia," Richard S.'s voice came through the door, deceptively calm. "I just want to talk. Open the door." I backed away, fumbling for my phone to call for help. The doorknob rattled as he tested it. "You know they'd be chasing the wrong person, right?" he continued conversationally. "I had someone create a diversion. They were all running around the east stairwell while I came up the west. Simple, really." My fingers found 911 on my phone, but before I could press call, Richard spoke again. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just need the recordings. Your precious bird has information that could send me to prison for life. More importantly, it could lead them to the money. My money." "It is not your money," I found my voice, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. "You stole it." A soft laugh from the other side of the door. "Semantics. I relocated it from people who had too much to myself, who had too little. But that is not important right now. What is important is that your feathered friend in there is the only thing connecting me to certain conversations." "You mean like the one about Kevin?" I challenged. "About taking care of him?" Silence. Then, in a harder voice, "That was unfortunate. Kevin panicked, made threats. I didn't intend for things to go that far. You killed him." "Yes, I protected my interests," Richard corrected. "Just like I am doing now. Give me the bird, Patricia. Or better yet, let me in, and I'll just use my phone to record all of its little speech patterns. Then I'll be on my way, and you'll never have to see me again." "The police will be here any minute," I warned, though I had no idea if that was true. "Maybe," Richard conceded, "but maybe not in time. Do you really want to take that chance? For a bird?" As he spoke, I noticed Polly beginning to move in her cage. Slowly, deliberately, she climbed to the door, worked the simple latch with her beak, a trick she'd learned long ago, and slipped out. "Polly, no," I whispered, but she ignored me, hopping to the floor and then, to my astonishment, moving toward the bedroom door. Before I could stop her, she began to speak, her voice a perfect imitation of Detective Lewis. "Richard Evans, this is Detective Lewis. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up." There was a startled pause from the other side of the door. Then, unbelievably, the sound of retreating footsteps. Had Richard actually fallen for it? I didn't dare hope, staying frozen in place, barely breathing. Minutes later, though it felt like hours, I heard multiple sets of footsteps approaching, followed by Officer Fletcher's voice. "Patricia, it's Ursula. Are you okay in there?" Only after I'd verified it was really her did I unlock the door, nearly collapsing with relief when I saw her standing there with two other officers. "He was here," I managed, the adrenaline still coursing through my system. "In the apartment. He wanted Polly." Ursula's face tightened. "We figured that out when we realized we were chasing a decoy." "I am so sorry, Patricia. Are you hurt?" I shook my head, still processing what had happened. Polly scared him off. She imitated Detective Lewis, made Richard think the police were right outside the door. One of the officers with Ursula looked skeptical, but she nodded thoughtfully. "Smart bird. But Richard cannot have gone far. We've got officers covering all exits now, for real this time." A thorough search of the building, however, yielded nothing. Richard had vanished once again, slipping away like a ghost. That night, after giving yet another statement to the police and agreeing to relocate to a safe house, I sat in the unfamiliar living room of a small apartment across town, Polly's cage beside me. Ursula remained my protective shadow, now joined by another officer named Brian, who would take shifts guarding the safe house. "Try to get some sleep," Ursula suggested gently. "We'd got this place locked down tight. He want to find you here." But sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard's face, heard his voice through my bedroom door. What had started as a simple fraud case had escalated into something far more dangerous, with an actual body count. And somehow, my Parrot had become central to it all. As dawn broke, Polly stirred in her cage, ruffling her feathers as she woke. She fixed me with those intelligent eyes and said in a perfect imitation of my voice, "What now?" It was a question I'd asked myself repeatedly throughout the night. What now, indeed? My phone rang. Wyatt, calling to check on me after learning about the previous night's drama from the police. "I can't believe all this," he said, his voice thick with concern. "First fraud, then murder, now breaking and entering? It is like something out of a thriller novel." "Except we reliving it," I replied wearily. "The police are saying Richard might try to leave the country," Wyatt continued. "They've alerted airports and border crossings, but you know how these things go. If he has enough cash and the right connections..." He didn't need to finish the thought. We both knew that people with resources could disappear if they were determined enough. "The thing I keep wondering," I said, "is why he doesn't just go. Why risk coming back for Polly? The police already know about the fraud and suspect him for Kevin's murder. Whatever Polly might repeat can to make his situation that much worse." "Unless," Wyatt said slowly, "there was something else. Something bigger that we don't to know about yet." The thought was unsettling. What else might Richard be involved in? What had Polly heard that was worth risking capture for? Over the next few days, a strange calm descended. No sign of Richard, no more threatening texts. The police maintained their guard on the safe house, but even they seemed to be considering the possibility that Richard had finally decided to cut his losses and flee. Detective Lewis visited on the third day, bringing with him a tech specialist named Tristan, who had an unusual request. "We'd like to record your Parrot," Detective Lewis explained. "Anything and everything she says, especially if it sounds like Richard or any other voices she might have picked up." I agreed, and Tristan set up recording equipment around Polly's cage. For her part, Polly seemed to enjoy the attention, showing off her extensive vocabulary and mimicry skills. She repeated snippets of conversations about offshore accounts, business dealings, and several names that the detective noted with great interest. But there was no smoking gun, no clear evidence that would lead them to either Richard or the missing money. On the 5th day, as I was beginning to wonder how long I would have to remain in hiding, Wyatt called with news. They found Richard's passport in, he said. It was turned in to lost and found at the international terminal at the airport. They think he might have dropped it accidentally while trying to leave the country. Hope surged within me, so they caught him. Not exactly. Wyatt sounded hesitant. There is no record of him boarding any flights, and the security footage doesn't show him at the terminal. It is weird, like he wanted them to think he was fleeing but didn't want to actually go anywhere. A chill ran through me. If Richard hadn't left the country, where was he? And what was he planning? That night, as Officer Brian kept watch and Ursula caught a few hours of sleep, I sat with Polly, absently stroking her feathers, while my mind churned with possibilities. "Yes, what aren't you telling us, Polly?" I murmured. "What else did Richard say?" Polly looked at me for a long moment, then spoke in Richard's voice, so clearly that I momentarily looked around in alarm. "Final transfer tomorrow. After that, new identity, new life. They'll never find me." My heart raced. This sounded like something recent, perhaps even from after Richard's crimes had been exposed. If the final transfer referred to moving the stolen money, and it was happening tomorrow, when had Richard said this? Was it too late to stop him? I was about to wake Ursula when Polly continued, still in Richard's voice, but now with a cold edge that made me shiver. Once it's done, just one loose end to tie up. That damn bird. Then nothing can connect me to any of it. The implications were clear. Richard still wanted to silence Polly, and by extension, me. He hadn't given up or fled. He was merely waiting for the right moment. And based on what Polly had just revealed, that moment might be coming very soon. I immediately woke Officer Fletcher, my heart pounding as I relayed what Polly had just mimicked. "A final transfer," Ursula repeated, instantly alert despite being woken from a deep sleep. Did she mention when or where? I shook my head. Just tomorrow. But I don't know when Richard said this. It could have been days ago. She was already reaching for her phone. "I'll contact Detective Lewis. If we can figure out where this transfer is happening, we might be able to catch Richard and recover the stolen funds." While Officer Fletcher made her calls, Officer Brian suggested moving Polly's cage away from the windows, a precaution in case Richard somehow discovered our location and was watching the apartment. As I helped him reposition the cage, Polly remained unusually quiet, observing everything with those intelligent eyes. Detective Lewis arrived within the hour, bringing with him a financial crimes specialist who peppered me with questions about Richard's banking habits, accounts he might have mentioned, and any favorite locations he might use to conduct business. "The problem," Detective Lewis explained, "is that there are countless ways to move money electronically. Without knowing exactly what kind of transfer he is planning or which accounts are involved, it is like looking for a needle in a digital haystack." As the specialists worked on tracing possible financial movements, I found myself staring at Polly, wondering what other crucial information she might be holding in that remarkable brain of hers. "I have an idea," I said suddenly. Richard often took calls in my living room while I was in the kitchen, but he also had a habit of pacing when he talked. He would walk back and forth in front of Polly's cage. I turned to Detective Lewis. "What if we recreate that environment? My apartment, the familiar surroundings, it might trigger Polly to repeat more of what she heard." The detective looked skeptical. "It is also exactly where Richard would expect to find you, which makes it the perfect trap," Officer Fletcher interjected. "If he was planning to come after Patricia and Polly after this transfer, why not be ready for him?" After much discussion and planning, we returned to my apartment the next morning. A team of officers had secured the building, with plainclothes detectives stationed in strategic locations. My apartment had been fitted with additional security measures, including hidden cameras that would record everything, especially anything Polly might say. I tried to recreate our normal routine, moving around the apartment as I typically would, occasionally walking into the kitchen while leaving Polly in the living room. Detective Lewis and Officer Fletcher remained out of sight in my bedroom, monitoring the hidden cameras. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Polly seemed content to preen her feathers and play with her toys, occasionally mimicking everyday sounds, the refrigerator humming, my kettle whistling, the sound of pages turning in a book. Then, as afternoon faded into evening, she suddenly perked up. Her head turned toward the window, though from her angle she couldn't possibly see outside. 5:00, she said in Richard's voice. Harbour Bank, safe deposit box 1246. I froze, then slowly walked back into the living room. What did you say, Polly? She tilted her head, looking at me curiously, then repeated, 5:00, Harbour Bank, safe deposit box 1246. Last piece of the puzzle. Detective Lewis emerged from the bedroom, his expression intense. Harbour Bank downtown has safe deposit boxes. Box 1246 could very well be Richard and S. 5:00, I repeated. That S less than an hour from now. A flurry of activity followed. Detective Lewis coordinated with other officers to set up surveillance at Harbour Bank, while Officer Fletcher stayed with me. We couldn't be certain that Richard would personally appear at the bank. He might have an accomplice, but it was the best lead they had. As law enforcement mobilized, my phone chimed with a text from Wyatt. Need to talk to you. Important. Can I come over? I showed the message to Officer Fletcher, who frowned. We didn't tell Mr. Collins about the operation today. How did he know you'd be back at your apartment? A cold feeling settled in my stomach. You think Richard might have his phone? She shook her head. Possible, but unlikely. Let me call Mr. Collins directly. Wyatt answered on the first ring, his voice puzzled as Officer Fletcher questioned him. No, I didn't send any text. I am at the bookstore right now, covering for Patricia. His voice grew concerned. What is going on? After explaining the situation, Officer Fletcher ended the call and immediately alerted her colleagues. Someone's pretending to be Wyatt. It could be Richard testing to see if you rehome, or it could be a distraction, I finished, a realization dawning. What if he has noticed the police at Harbour Bank? What if he is trying to draw attention away from somewhere else? Polly suddenly flapped her wings agitatedly and squawked, Wrong box. A wrong bank. Trick. Officer Fletcher and I exchanged alarmed glances. Could Richard have anticipated we might overhear his plans? Could he have deliberately mentioned Harbour Bank within Polly's hearing, knowing she might repeat it? Before she could respond, Polly continued in Richard's voice, They'll watch Harbour while I empty Coastal. Perfect misdirection. Coastal Credit Union, I breathed. Richard has accounts there too. He mentioned it once, said it was where he kept his rainy day funds. Officer Fletcher was already on her radio, redirecting some of the officers to Coastal Credit Union. But resources were stretched thin now, divided between multiple locations. We should stay put, she advised. This apartment is secure and backup is close by if... A loud thud from the hallway interrupted her. We both froze, listening intently. Then came the unmistakable sound of my neighbor's door opening, followed by a muffled conversation. Probably nothing, Officer Fletcher whispered, but I'll check it out. Stay here, keep the door locked. After she left, I moved to Polly's cage, my nerves on edge. What else do you know, Polly? What else did Richard say? Polly clicked her beak anxiously, then spoke in a voice I didn't recognize. The roof access, like we discussed. She'll never expect it. My blood ran cold. The roof access, just like the night Richard had broken in before, and Officer Fletcher had just left to investigate a potential distraction. I grabbed my phone to call her back, but there was no signal. Jammed, I realized with growing horror. Moving quickly, I locked the bedroom door and pushed a dresser in front of it, then took Polly from her cage and held her close. We need to hide, I whispered. From outside the bedroom, I heard the faint sound of my front door opening. Quiet footsteps crossed the living room, approaching the bedroom. Patricia? Richard's voice, deceptively calm. I know you are in there. Let us talk, like civilized people. I remained silent, my heart hammering in my chest. Where was Officer Fletcher? Where was the backup she had mentioned? The police are busy at the banks, Richard continued conversationally. Very clever, using the bird to misdirect them. But not clever enough, I'm afraid. A gentle knock on the bedroom door. You can stay in there forever, and I only want one thing, that bird. Give it to me, and I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. Polly trembled in my arms, unnaturally quiet. I desperately looked around for an escape route. but the only window in my bedroom faced a sheer drop to the street below. Then Polly did something unexpected. She began to make a series of sounds, a door opening, footsteps, muffled voices, all in a sequence that sounded remarkably like multiple people entering an apartment. Richard fell silent, apparently listening to the sounds. "Nice try," he said after a moment, "but your bird-esque tricks want to work on me twice." The doorknob rattled. Then there was a solid thud as he tried to force it open. The dresser held, but I knew it wouldn't tee for long. In desperation, I moved to the window, hoping to signal to someone on the street below. As I pushed aside the curtain, I nearly gasped aloud. There on the fire escape outside my window was Wyatt. He put a finger to his lips, then pointed upward, mouthing words I couldn't understand. Before I could react, he disappeared from view, climbing higher up the fire escape. Richard hit the door again, harder this time. The dresser scraped a few inches across the floor. "I'm losing patience, Patricia," he called, his voice hardening. "When I get in there, and I will get in there, things will go much worse for you if you—" He made me angry. Another blow to the door, another few inches of movement from the dresser. Above me, I heard footsteps on the fire escape, then a sudden crash from the living room, followed by a shout of surprise from Richard. "Police! Don to move!" It was Officer Fletcher's voice, followed by sounds of a struggle. I clutched Polly tighter, frozen in place as I tried to make sense of what was happening. A knock on my window made me jump. Wyatt was back, gesturing for me to open it. With shaking hands, I unlocked the window and slid it up. "Are you okay?" he whispered, helping me climb out onto the fire escape, Polly still cradled in my arms. "How did you know?" I asked as he led me upward toward the roof. "I didn't," he admitted. "But when Officer Fletcher called, I got worried. I came over just to check on you, and I saw someone forcing the service door on the roof, just like last time. I called 911, then climbed up the fire escape to warn you." We reached the roof, where Officer Burton was waiting with several other officers. "We got him," he confirmed, relief evident in his voice. "Fletcher has Richard in custody. He put up a fight, but she is tougher than she looks." As the adrenaline drained from my system, I sank down onto an AC unit, still holding Polly close. She nuzzled against my neck, making soft, comforting sounds. "It's over," I whispered to her. "You'll be safe now. We both are." Over the next several hours, the full story emerged. Richard had indeed been planning to empty accounts at Coastal Credit Union while the police were watching Harbour Bank. The final transfer had been scheduled for that evening, moving the last of the stolen funds to an untraceable cryptocurrency wallet before he disappeared. What he hadn't counted on was Polly's perfect recall of his contingency plans or Wyatt's timely intervention. As Officer Fletcher explained while the paramedics checked a cut on her arm, a souvenir from her scuffle with Richard, they had recovered Richard's phone, which contained evidence not just of the fraud and his involvement in Kevin's death, but of a larger criminal network he'd been working with. "Your Parrot," she said, shaking her head in amazement, "has helped us crack a case that spans 3 states and involves millions in stolen funds. I've never seen anything like it." Detective Lewis arrived later to inform us that they had managed to freeze most of the stolen money before Richard could transfer it. "We couldn't have done it without your help, both of you," he added, nodding toward Polly, who was now perched contentedly on my shoulder. In the days that followed, life slowly began to return to normal. I reopened my bookstore with Wyatt's help and installed a special perch behind the counter for Polly, who quickly became a local celebrity. Customers would often bring her treats or small toys, delighted when she thanked them by name. Richard, facing charges of fraud, money laundering, and second-degree murder, had little choice but to cooperate with authorities in exchange for the possibility of a reduced sentence. His information led to the arrest of several accomplices and the recovery of additional stolen funds. One quiet evening, about a month after Richard's arrest, Wyatt and I were closing up the bookstore together. Polly, who had been unusually quiet all day, suddenly began to laugh, a perfect imitation of Richard's laugh that sent chills down my spine. "Does she do that often?" Wyatt asked, pausing in his task of shelving returns. "Never before," I admitted, watching as Polly continued to laugh, then abruptly stopped and fixed us with an intense stare. "Bad man gone," she said in her own distinct voice, not mimicking anyone. "Good man here." She bobbed her head toward Wyatt, who blushed deeply. I couldn't help but laugh. Well, she is not wrong. Wyatt smiled, a hint of something more than friendship in his eyes. "Your Parrot giving me her approval?" "Seems that way," I agreed, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the cozy bookstore environment. "She's an excellent judge of character, you know." "So I've heard," he replied, moving closer. "I'll try not to disappoint her." Polly watched us with apparent satisfaction, then began preening her feathers as if to give us privacy. Life would never be quite the same after the events of those harrowing days. The experience had changed me in profound ways. I was more cautious, yes, but also more aware of the intuitive signals that are easily dismissed in our logical world. Polly had tried to warn me about Richard from the beginning, and I had ignored her. I wouldn't make that mistake again. In the months that followed, as Wyatt and I grew closer, Polly thrived in her new role as bookstore mascot and local hero. Occasionally, she would still mimic Richard's voice, usually when a suspicious customer entered the store or when someone tried to shortchange me at the register. It was her way, I supposed, of continuing to protect me. During Richard's trial, my testimony, along with the recordings of Polly mimicking his incriminating statements, played a crucial role in securing a conviction. The judge, initially skeptical about Parrot evidence, was eventually convinced by expert testimony about the remarkable accuracy of African grey mimicry and the consistent content of Polly's repetitions. Richard was sentenced to many years in prison. As he was led from the courtroom, he glanced at me with a mixture of resentment and grudging respect. I met his gaze steadily, Polly perched confidently on my shoulder. Detective Lewis approached us afterward. "You two make quite a team," he said, smiling as Polly mimicked the sound of the gavel. "Have you considered a career in law enforcement?" I laughed, stroking Polly's feathers. "I think we'll stick to books, thank you, though I've been thinking of adding a true crime section to the store." That evening, as we celebrated the end of the trial with a small gathering at the bookstore, Wyatt raised a toast. "To Patricia and Polly, proof that you should always listen when someone you trust tries to warn you, especially if that someone has feathers." Everyone laughed, including Polly, who had perfected her imitation of human laughter to an almost unsettling degree. Later, after the guests had gone and Wyatt was helping me clean up, he suddenly grew serious. "You know, there is something I've been wondering. How did Polly know? I mean really know, from the very beginning, that Richard was bad news, before she'd overheard anything incriminating?" I paused, considering the question. I'd wondered the same thing myself many times. "I think animals sense things we can see," I said finally. "They don't get distracted by words or charm or good looks. They see the core of a person." Wyatt nodded thoughtfully. "Makes you wonder what Polly thinks of the rest of us." As if on cue, Polly flew from her perch to land on Wyatt's shoulder, gently preening his hair in a gesture of affection she rarely showed anyone but me. "I think that answers your question," I said, smiling at the picture they made. A year after Richard's arrest, the bookstore had expanded to include a small cafe and reading area. Wyatt had officially become my business partner, though we both knew our partnership extended far beyond the store. Polly had her own specially designed area where customers could interact with her under supervision. Children especially loved her, bringing her drawings that she would solemnly approve with a bobbing of her head. One day a woman entered the store, hesitantly approaching the counter where I was sorting through new arrivals. "Are you Patricia?" she asked. "The one with the parrot who—" She trailed off, seemingly unsure how to continue. "Who helped catch a criminal?" I finished for her, smiling. "Yes, that is me, and Polly is right over there." The woman followed my gesture, her eyes widening as she saw Polly entertaining a group of children by mimicking their laughter. "My name is Helen," she said, turning back to me. "Helen Marshall, Kevin was my brother." My smile faded. "Oh, I am so sorry for your loss." She nodded, blinking back tears. "The police told me how your parrot helped provide evidence against Richard. I just wanted to come and say thank you. Kevin made some mistakes, got involved with the wrong people, but he didn't deserve what happened to him. You helped give our family closure." I called Polly over, and she flew to land on my arm, studying Helen with curious eyes. "Polly," I said softly, This is Helen. She is thanking you for helping find justice for her brother." Polly tilted her head, then spoke in her own voice, not mimicking anyone. "Truth important. Bad man punished." Helena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling now. "Amazing," she whispered. "Simply amazing." After she left, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought us here. A series of seemingly random events, adopting Polly from a retiring professor, meeting Richard, Polly's inexplicable dislike of him, had combined to uncover a criminal conspiracy and bring justice to the victims. Wyatt found me lost in thought, Polly still perched contentedly on my arm. "Everything okay?" he asked, slipping an arm around my waist. "Just thinking about how life takes such unexpected turns," I replied, leaning into him. If Polly hadn't hated Richard so obviously, I might never have questioned who he really was until it was too late. Wyatt chuckled. "The parrot who hated your boyfriend." Then he disappeared and she started laughing. "Sounds like the title of a mystery novel," I joked. "Maybe it should be," he suggested. "Your next project, perhaps? The first in a series of Polly the Detective Parrot mysteries?" I laughed, but the idea took root. Why not? Our story might help others trust their instincts and their pets when something doesn't feel right. As if reading my thoughts, Polly bobbed her head in what looked remarkably like agreement, then spoke in a perfect imitation of my voice. "Trust your heart. Animals know." And in that moment, surrounded by books, with Wyatt beside me and Polly watching the world with her wise eyes, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, an unlikely family forged in the crucible of danger and united by the simple, powerful truth that sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources. Polly never again mimicked Richard's voice or repeated those frightening conversations. It was as if, once justice had been served, she deliberately chose to let go of those memories, focusing instead on building a vocabulary of joy, laughter, and kindness. And when customers would inevitably ask about the story behind the famous crime-solving parrot, I would simply smile and say, "She saw the truth when I couldn't Sometimes the ones we think can speak are the ones we most need to listen to." Polly, perched nearby, would invariably add the last word: trust, love, truth. 3 simple words that had guided us through darkness and into light, a feathered philosopher's distillation of everything we needed to know. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.